The phone buzzed against my desk, an unknown number flashing across the screen. I almost ignored it, another spam call, probably. But something made me pick it up, and those 12 words changed everything. Check your joint account. Your husband isn't who you think he is. My name is Morgan, and until that moment, I thought I had my life figured out. 15 years of marriage, a comfortable routine, and enough mutual respect to weather the occasional storm. At least, that's what I told myself. I stared at my computer screen, cursor hovering over the login button for our bank account. My hands trembled slightly as I typed in the password. One click, and the numbers loaded. They didn't make sense at first, columns of transactions, dates, amounts that shouldn't exist. Morgan? Janet from accounting poked her head around my cubicle. The quarterly review meeting starts in 5. I'll be right there. My voice sounded hollow, distant. The screen showed regular withdrawals, 5,000 here, 8,000 there. Money flowing out like water through cupped hands, all to an account I didn't recognize. I grabbed my phone and dialed Greg's number. Straight to voicemail. Of course. Hey, you've reached Greg Mitchell. Leave a message. I hung up. The quarterly review droned on endlessly. I sat there, nodding mechanically while my mind raced through years of memories, searching for signs I must have missed. The late nights at the office. The business trips that seemed to multiply. The way he'd started password protecting his phone last year. Morgan, what are your thoughts on the new client acquisition strategy? My boss's voice cut through the fog. I think we need to dig deeper into the numbers, I heard myself say. Sometimes things aren't what they appear to be on the surface. After the meeting, I called my brother Lucas. I need you to look something up for me, I said when he answered. You still have access to those banking databases, right? Morgan? What's going on? Just, please. I'll explain later. He sighed. Give me the account number. I read it off my screen, trying to keep my voice steady. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Lucas, call me. Now. I locked myself in the bathroom before dialing. Tell me. The account belongs to Samantha Reeves, Lucas said. She's an executive at Innovatech. Greg's company. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I gripped the edge of the sink. How much? Morgan. How much, Lucas? Over 200,000 in the past year alone. The number hit me like a physical blow. $200,000. Our savings, our future, our trust, all of it funneled into some other woman's account. There's more, Lucas continued. They've been booking hotel rooms. Expensive ones. And there are charges for jewelry, restaurants. Morgan, I'm so sorry. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed different somehow, harder, colder. Don't be sorry, I said. Be helpful. I need everything you can find on both of them. What are you planning? I don't know yet. But even as I said it, something was crystallizing inside me, a determination as sharp as broken glass. But Greg's about to learn something about karma. Morgan. I have to go. I ended the call and straightened my blazer, checking my reflection one last time. The woman in the mirror smiled back at me, and it wasn't a nice smile. Greg always said I was too forgiving, too willing to see the best in people. He was about to discover just how wrong he'd been about that, about everything. I walked back to my desk, opened a new document, and began to type. The first step in dismantling someone's life is making a list of everything they hold dear. And after 15 years of marriage, I knew exactly where all Greg's weak spots were. My childhood home hadn't changed in 20 years. Same faded wallpaper, same creaking third step on the porch, same judgmental silence from my father as I wheeled my suitcase through the front door. $200,000. Dad's voice cut through the quiet like a knife. Lucas had already called them, of course. How did you not notice? Tom. Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Let her at least get settled first. I dropped my bag by the stairs, the weight of failure pressing down on my shoulders. It's fine, Mom. Dad's right. I should have seen it. Damn right you should have. Dad paced the living room, his military posture rigid with disapproval. I told you 15 years ago that man was trouble. Didn't I say it, Evelyn? What you said or didn't say doesn't matter now, Mom shot back. She guided me toward the kitchen, where the smell of her signature pot roast filled the air. What matters is helping Morgan figure out her next steps. Her next steps should be calling the police, Lucas called from the dining room. He was hunched over his laptop, probably digging deeper into Greg's finances. The bastard committed fraud. I sank into a kitchen chair, watching Mom slice carrots with precise, angry movements. It's not that simple. Like hell it isn't. Dad joined us, his presence filling the small kitchen. He stole from you. From your future. And what about my reputation? The words burst out before I could stop them. You think anyone's going to want to work with an accountant who couldn't even spot her own husband embezzling money? Silence fell, broken only by the rhythmic chopping of Mom's knife. Morgan. Lucas looked up from his screen. There's something else you need to see. I didn't want to look. But I found myself moving anyway, leaning over his shoulder to stare at the screen. Credit card statements, restaurant receipts, hotel bookings, a paper trail of betrayal stretching back 3 years. 3 years, I whispered. We were still trying for a baby 3 years ago. Mom's knife clattered against the cutting board. That miserable son of a. Evelyn, Dad warned, but there was no heat in it. No, Tom. I watched our daughter blame herself for not getting pregnant, while that man, she stopped, her face flushed with anger. I've got more, Lucas said quietly. Samantha Reeves isn't just his mistress. She's on Innovateca's board of directors. The money, it's not just going to hotels and jewelry. I straightened up, something cold and calculating settling into my chest. What do you mean? They're investing it. Starting some kind of tech venture on the side. Using company resources, from what I can tell. Dad's eyebrows shot up. That's corporate espionage. That's leverage, I corrected, my mind already racing ahead. Lucas, can you get me proof? Something concrete? Morgan. Mom's voice held a warning. Think carefully about what you're planning. I am thinking carefully. I turned to face her, seeing the concern in her eyes. For the first time in 15 years, I'm thinking with perfect clarity. Revenge won't fix this, she said softly. No. I managed a smile that felt more like baring teeth. But it'll be a damn good start. Dad cleared his throat. You know, when I was in the service, we had a saying, the best revenge is served institutionally. Lucas snorted. Pretty sure that's not the actual saying, Dad. The point is, Dad continued, if you're going to do this, do it right. Make it count. I looked around at my family, Mom's worried strength, Dad's stern support, Lucas's protective fury. They'd seen this coming 15 years ago, when Greg had charmed his way into my life with smooth words and bigger dreams. They'd watched me ignore the red flags, choose him over their concerns, build my life around his lies. I need your help, I said finally. All of you. But this has to be done my way. Mom wiped her hands again, a determined set to her jaw. Well then, sweetheart. Let's make a plan. The pot roast grew cold on the counter as we gathered around Lucas's laptop, plotting the systematic dismantling of Greg Mitchell's carefully constructed world. By midnight, I had the beginnings of a strategy that would make him wish he'd never heard the name Morgan Mitchell. Or whatever I decided to call myself after the divorce. Innovateca's headquarters loomed before me, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky. I adjusted my visitor's badge, remembering countless dinner parties where Greg had bragged about this building, about his rising star in the company. Now I was here to watch that star crash and burn. Miss Mitchell? The receptionist's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Mr. Chin will see you now. I smoothed my skirt and gripped my briefcase tighter. Inside were copies of every transaction, every secret meeting, every lie Greg had carefully constructed over the past 3 years. Lucas had done his job well. Morgan Mitchell. James Chen, Innovateca's CFO, stood as I entered his office. I have to admit, I was intrigued by your email. You mentioned concerns about internal financial irregularities? Yes. I placed my briefcase on his desk, noting the family photo behind him. Wife, 2 kids, golden retriever. A man with everything to lose if scandal hit. Perfect. But before we begin, I should mention that my brother works in financial forensics at the FBI. Chen's smile flickered. I see. And why is that relevant? I pulled out the first file. Because what I'm about to show you isn't just about my divorce from Greg Mitchell. It's about protecting Innovatec from what's coming. 2 hours later, I stood in the parking garage, hands shaking as I fumbled for my car keys. Chen's face had gone from skeptical to ashen as I'd laid out the evidence. The shell companies. The diverted contracts. The technical specifications being sold to competitors. My phone buzzed. Greg's name flashed on the screen. You visited my office today. His voice was tight, controlled. My secretary said you left something for me. Just divorce papers, Greg. Nothing to worry about. Then why did James Chen cancel our meeting and clear his afternoon schedule? I smiled, remembering the manila envelope I'd left on Greg's desk. Empty, except for a post-it note, I know everything. Maybe he had something more important to deal with. Like the company's future. Morgan. His voice dropped lower. Whatever you think you know. 3 years, Greg. 3 years of lies while I blamed myself for not being enough. For not giving you a child. Tell me, does Samantha know about the vasectomy you got in 2019? Silence crackled across the line. You want to play games? The facade cracked, revealing the anger beneath. Fine. But remember who knows all your secrets too. Like that audit you fudged for the Peterson account last year. My blood ran cold. He'd promised never to mention that, my one professional compromise, made to protect a client's dying business. You wouldn't. Try me. You've got 24 hours to retract whatever you told Chen, or I start making calls. The line went dead. I leaned against my car, breath coming in short gasps. The parking garage spun around me as Greg's threat sank in. One phone call could end my career, destroy everything I'd worked for. My phone buzzed again. Lucas. Tell me you didn't go to Innovatec alone, he said without preamble. I had to move fast. Chen was. Damn it, Morgan. Greg just called his lawyer. They're preparing some kind of preemptive strike. He's bluffing. But my voice wavered. No, he's desperate. And desperate men are dangerous. Get back to Mom and Dad's. Now. I started the car with trembling hands. As I pulled out of the garage, a familiar Mercedes pulled in Samantha's car. She saw me, our eyes meeting briefly through windshields. Something passed between us, recognition, maybe understanding. She knew what it was like to trust Greg Mitchell's lies. But unlike her, I wasn't going to be just another woman he destroyed. My phone buzzed one more time. Unknown number, like the first warning about the bank account. The message was simple, there's more. Meet me tomorrow, 9 a.m., Riverside Cafe. I took a deep breath, thinking of the empty envelope on Greg's desk, of Chen's pale face, of Samantha's knowing look. The game was escalating faster than I'd planned, spinning beyond my careful strategies into something darker and more dangerous. But I was done being careful. Greg wanted to play with fire. Fine. I'd burn his whole world down, even if I had to burn with it. The Riverside Cafe buzzed with morning traffic, but the woman at the corner table sat alone, her red manicure tapping against a manila envelope. I recognized her instantly, Sarah Peterson, my former client's wife. The one whose audit I'd falsified. I wondered how long it would take Greg to use this against you, she said as I slid into the seat across from her. My throat tightened. He called you. Actually, Sarah smiled, pushing the envelope toward me. I called him. After I sent you that first text about checking your bank account. The world tilted sideways. I stared at her, pieces clicking into place. You knew. About Samantha, about everything. Karen in accounting at Innovatech is my sister. She noticed the irregularities months ago, but Greg threatened her job. Sarah's smile hardened. Nobody threatens my family. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were documents, dozens of them. Bank statements, emails, photographs. Evidence of corruption that went far beyond what Lucas and I had uncovered. Greg's not just stealing from Innovatech, Sarah continued. He's selling proprietary technology to Chinese competitors. That's why he needed Samantha, her connections in the Asian market. Why are you showing me this? Because he's going to try to destroy you with that audit, Morgan. And I won't let him use my family's business to do it. My phone buzzed, Lucas calling again. I ignored it. The audit wasn't fake, Sarah said quietly. We really were in trouble. You just helped us show the numbers in a more favorable light. But here's what Greg doesn't know. She tapped the envelope. We kept 2 sets of books. The real numbers actually matched your audit. You didn't falsify anything. Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by rage. Greg had held this over me for nothing. There's more, Sarah added. Samantha's getting nervous. She reached out to Karen yesterday. She wants to make a deal. The cafe door chimed. I glanced up to see my mother walking in, her face tight with worry. Lucas must have called her. Morgan. She reached our table, hands twisting her purse strap. Greg just showed up at the house. He's talking to your father. What? I stood so quickly my chair scraped across the floor. Why didn't you call me? Because I needed to tell you in person. Mom's voice dropped. He's not alone. He brought someone from the SEC with him. Sarah cursed under her breath. He's moving faster than we thought. The Securities and Exchange Commission? My voice sounded distant, hollow. He's really going to. He's trying to get ahead of the story, Sarah cut in. Make himself look like the whistleblower before everything comes out. Classic Greg. Mom touched my arm. Your father's stalling him, but nothing. I grabbed the envelope, my mind racing. Sarah, can your sister get us into Innovatech tonight? Karen has after-hours access, yes. Why? I thought of Greg in my parents' living room, probably sitting in Dad's favorite chair, playing the concerned ex-husband. Trying to destroy me while acting like he was doing everyone a favor. Because we're not waiting anymore. Tell Samantha if she wants to make a deal, she has until midnight. After that, everything goes public, her involvement included. Morgan, Mom started, but I was already heading for the door. Call Lucas, I told her. Tell him to meet me at Innovatech with every piece of evidence we have. And Mom? I turned back, seeing the worry in her eyes. Tell Dad to keep Greg there as long as possible. I need time to set this up. Set what up? I thought of Greg's smug face, of Samantha's knowing look in the parking garage, of all the nights I'd spent crying over a marriage that had been a lie from the start. His downfall. I pushed through the cafe door into the morning sun. It's time Greg learned what it feels like to lose everything. Behind me, I heard Sarah's quiet laugh. I'll call Karen. And Morgan? Make it hurt. I didn't answer. I was already dialing James Chen's number, the weight of Sarah's envelope heavy in my bag. Greg thought he could bury me with lies. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Innovatech's security desk was empty when we arrived at 11:45 p.m. Karen Peterson's keycard got us through the lobby, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking as we rode the elevator to the executive floor. You sure about this? Lucas asked, clutching his laptop bag. Once we upload these files to the company servers, there's no taking it back. The elevator dinged. 36th floor. Greg's office would be dark now, waiting for tomorrow's board meeting where he planned to destroy me. Morgan? Samantha's voice made us both jump. She stood in the hallway, still wearing her designer suit from earlier. I got your message. You said we could make a deal? Lucas stepped forward, but I caught his arm. Something in Samantha's stance felt wrong. Too rigid. Too rehearsed. Where's Greg? I asked quietly. A familiar chuckle echoed down the hall. Greg emerged from his office, followed by two men in dark suits. Right here, darling. Did you really think Samantha would turn on me? That anyone would believe you over me? The sec has already seen the evidence, Lucas snapped. You mean these? Greg held up Sarah's envelope. My stomach dropped. Amazing what a concerned citizen can find in a cafe when someone leaves their table unattended. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mom's arrival. The rush to leave. I'd been so focused on getting to Innovatech that I hadn't noticed. The real question, Greg continued, is what the sec will think about an accountant who falsifies audits, then tries to frame her ex-husband when he discovers her crime. That audit wasn't falsified, I said, but my voice wavered. Prove it. Greg's smile widened. Oh wait, you can't. Because the only copy of the Petersons' real books burned in that tragic office fire last week. Such a shame. The pieces clicked together. The fire. Sarah's revelation. It had all been orchestrated. You son of a bitch. Lucas moved toward Greg, but the sec agents stepped forward. I wouldn't, Greg warned. Assaulting a federal witness wouldn't look good for either of you. My mind raced. Everything we'd gathered, every piece of evidence, was worthless without Sarah's documents to back them up. Greg had played us perfectly. Why? The word scraped out of my throat. Why go through all this? You already had everything. Because you wouldn't let go. Greg's facade cracked, revealing something ugly beneath. Even after I left, you kept pushing, kept digging. I built this life, Morgan. Everything I am. And you thought you could just tear it down? You built it on lies. I built it on whatever I had to. He nodded to the agents. She's all yours, gentlemen. Wait. Samantha's voice cut through the tension. She hadn't moved from her spot, hadn't even blinked. There's something you should see first. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen. A familiar voice filled the hallway, Greg's voice, from earlier that day. Burn the evidence, just like the Peterson files. Morgan won't know what hit her. Greg's face went slack. What are you doing? Insurance. Samantha's perfectly manicured finger hovered over her phone. Karen's not the only one who keeps records, Greg. And unlike you, I learn from my mistakes. The sec agents exchanged glances. One reached for his phone. You really should be more careful about who you trust, I said quietly, watching Greg's world crumble in real time. Karma's funny that way. Greg lunged for Samantha's phone. Everything happened at once, Lucas tackling Greg, agents shouting, Samantha backing away with a satisfied smile. And me, standing in the middle of it all, watching 15 years of lies finally catch fire. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, check your email. Karen kept copies of everything. Let him burn. I looked at Greg, pinned beneath Lucas while the agents read him his rights. He caught my eye, and for the first time, I saw real fear there. Good. Send it all, I texted back to Sarah. Then I walked away, leaving Greg to face the consequences of his own perfect trap. Sometimes the best revenge isn't setting the fire yourself. It's just making sure all the right people are there to watch it burn. The Innovatech Awards ceremony buzzed with artificial cheer, executives in expensive suits pretending they hadn't just watched their star employee led away in handcuffs. I sat at the back, my laptop open to emails that would destroy everything Greg had built, waiting for the perfect moment. James Chen approached my table, his face ashen. The board wants to handle this internally. Of course they do. I didn't look up from my screen. How much is Greg offering them? Enough to make this go away. Chen loosened his tie. He's claiming temporary insanity, stress from the divorce. Says he'll return everything. My finger hovered over the send button. One click would send evidence of Greg's crimes to every major financial publication in the country. And Samantha? Claiming she was manipulated. She's willing to testify against Greg in exchange for immunity. Of course she was. I watched her across the room, already cozying up to board members, spinning her own version of events. She caught my eye and raised her champagne glass in a mock toast. The board's prepared to offer you a settlement, Chen continued. Substantial compensation, full NDAs on both sides. Everyone saves face. My phone buzzed. Lucas, don't do anything yet. Greg's lawyer called. He's got something on Dad. The room tilted sideways. I thought of my father's military career, his government contracts, the consulting work he did after retirement. How much had Greg learned over 15 years of family dinners? Morgan? Chen's voice seemed distant. We need an answer. Another text from Lucas, Dad's meeting with Greg now. Says to wait. The podium microphone crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could begin. I closed my laptop, feeling the weight of every decision, every move that had led to this moment. The evidence would destroy Greg, yes. But how many others would burn with him? My father. The Peterson family. Hundreds of Innovatech employees. Your father's here. Chen nodded toward the entrance. Dad stood there in his best suit, face carved from stone. Behind him, Greg's lawyer wore a smile that made my stomach turn. 2 minutes, I told Chen, already moving toward them. Dad met me halfway. You need to delete those emails. What did he find? Doesn't matter. His military posture was rigid, but I saw the fear in his eyes. Some mistakes should stay buried, Morgan. Like Greg's mistakes? The ones that destroyed my life? No. Dad gripped my arm. Like the ones that could destroy everything I built for this family. Everything I did to protect you and Lucas. Understanding hit like a physical blow. The consulting work. The classified contracts. The money that always seemed to appear when we needed it. How bad? Bad enough that Greg's lawyer has already called Washington. Dad's voice cracked. I did what I had to do, Morgan. For my family. Just like you're doing now. But some fires burn everything they touch. The microphone squealed again. And now, to present our annual Innovation Award. I looked around the room, at Samantha playing the victim, at Chen sweating through his suit, at the board members pretending nothing was wrong. All of us tangled in webs of our own making. My phone buzzed one final time. A message from Greg, we're not so different, you and I. We both know the price of protecting what's ours. The laptop felt heavy in my hands. One click to burn it all down. One click to save my father. One click to become exactly what Greg had always been, someone who'd sacrifice anything, anyone, to win. Morgan. Dad's voice was soft now. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't fighting. It's knowing when to stop. I opened my laptop, staring at the draft emails. All that evidence, all that righteous fury, all that carefully planned revenge. And in the end, Greg had found the one thing I couldn't sacrifice. My fingers moved across the keyboard. Delete. 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 Across the room, Samantha raised her glass again. This time, her smile held something like respect. I closed the laptop and stood. Let's go home, Dad. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the war. It's in choosing which battles aren't worth the cost of victory. The envelope arrived 3 days after I deleted the evidence. Plain white, no return address, containing a single USB drive and a note in Samantha's elegant handwriting, choose wisely. I sat in my car outside Innovateca's headquarters, watching Greg through the lobby windows. He was back at work, the board's protection buying him a second chance he didn't deserve. My father's secrets had bought his freedom, but secrets had a way of surfacing. My phone buzzed. "Lucas, you sure about this?" I didn't respond. The USB drive felt heavy in my pocket as I walked through the lobby, past security, into the elevator. Greg's office was on the top floor now, a promotion for keeping quiet about irregularities in the company's finances. He looked up when I entered, that familiar smirk playing at his lips. "Come to negotiate?" "Something like that." I placed Samantha's USB drive on his desk. "She left the country this morning. Dubai, I think. But she left you a parting gift." The smirk faltered. "What game are you playing, Morgan?" "The one you taught me." I sat down, crossing my legs. "See, I've been thinking about what you said. About protecting what's ours." Greg picked up the drive, turning it over in his hands. "Samantha's gone? With most of your offshore accounts." I smiled as his face paled. "Turns out she was better at your game than you were." "You're bluffing. Check your accounts." I waited while he typed, watched the blood drain from his face. "She left copies of everything. Every transaction, every deal, every secret you ever kept. Insurance, she called it. I'll destroy it." "You could. But then the backup copies would go straight to the FBI." I leaned forward. "Not the SEC this time. The real FBI. The kind that doesn't care about corporate settlements or NDAs." Greg's hands shook slightly as he set down the drive. "What do you want?" "A confession. Public. Full. You'll return every penny you stole, resign from Innovatech, and clear my father's name." "Or what?" "Or I stop protecting you." The words felt like ice in my mouth. "Everything you have left, your reputation, your freedom, your future, exists because I chose to delete those emails. I can unmake that choice." "You wouldn't." But uncertainty crept into his voice. "Your father has nothing left to hide." We spent the last 3 days clearing his name through proper channels. Amazing what military connections can do when properly motivated. Greg stood abruptly, pacing behind his desk. "I'll fight this." "Like Samantha fought you?" "How did it feel, Greg, watching someone you trusted turn everything against you?" "I loved you," he whispered. "No. You loved winning." I stood, smoothing my skirt. "You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Confession or destruction. Your choice." "And if I confess?" His voice cracked. "What do you get out of it?" "The truth. Sometimes that's enough." I walked to the door, then paused. "You know what the difference is between us, Greg?" I learned when to stop. "You never did. Morgan." He called after me, desperation edging into his voice. "What if I told you everything? About the money, about Samantha, about all of it?" "I already know everything." I turned back one last time. "The question is, do you know enough to save yourself?" The elevator doors closed on his stricken face. In my pocket, my phone buzzed with a message from Samantha. "It's done. Accounts emptied. Evidence secured. Good luck." I smiled, thinking of Greg discovering that his partner in crime had played him just as thoroughly as he'd played me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dealing the final blow yourself, it's orchestrating the perfect moment for someone else to do it. Tomorrow, Greg would either confess or be destroyed. Either way, I'd win. Not through the scorched earth tactics he'd taught me, but by being smarter, more patient, more willing to let others play their parts in his downfall. The real victory wasn't in the revenge itself. It was in choosing how to execute it. The morning news played silently on the cafe's wall-mounted TV. Greg's confession scrolled across the bottom of the screen while his drawn face filled the frame above. I stirred my coffee, remembering a time when that face had meant everything to me. Quite a performance, Sarah Peterson said, sliding into the seat across from me. Though I suspect the tears were real. They always were. I pushed a manila envelope across the table. Your share of the recovered funds. Karen's too. Sarah pocketed the envelope without checking it. Samantha sent a postcard from Dubai. Says the weather's perfect. And the offshore accounts? Drained. Every penny going back to Innovateca's investors. She studied my face. Having second thoughts? I watched Greg on the screen, reading his carefully prepared statement. The same words I'd written for him, confessing to everything except what he'd truly stolen, 15 years of trust, of dreams, of believing in something that never existed. No thoughts at all, actually. I surprised myself by meaning it. That's the strange part. My phone buzzed, Lucas sending updates from the FBI investigation. I ignored it. The aftermath would play out without my help now, dominoes falling in a pattern I'd stopped caring about. Your father called me, Sarah said quietly. Wanted to thank us for helping clear his name. Did you tell him it was Samantha's idea? Using Greg's own tactics against him? I told him his daughter learned to fight smart instead of angry. Sarah's lips curved. He seemed proud. The cafe door chimed. Mom walked in, carrying a box of my things from the house. Ready? I stood, leaving cash for the coffee. Sarah caught my wrist. Was it worth it? All of it? Through the window, I could see the moving truck idling outside. Everything I owned packed inside, ready for wherever I decided to go next. No plan, no revenge plot, no carefully constructed strategy. Just possibility. The revenge wasn't the point, I said finally. It was learning I didn't need it. Morgan. Sarah's voice stopped me again. The anonymous tip about Greg's accounts. It wasn't Samantha, was it? I thought of the late nights studying Greg's patterns, of the quiet satisfaction of beating him at his own game. Of the moment I realized I could destroy him completely, and the moment I chose not to. Does it matter? Sarah smiled. I suppose not. Mom waited by the door, patient as always. On the TV, Greg's confession ended. The anchor's lips moved silently, probably speculating about criminal charges and corporate fallout. None of it seemed important anymore. You know what the funny thing is? I said, more to myself than Sarah. He taught me everything I needed to take him down. The planning, the manipulation, the perfect timing. But he never taught me when to stop. And who taught you that? I looked at Mom, remembering her quiet strength during those first days of discovery. Dad's stern wisdom about choosing battles. Lucas's protective fury giving way to calculated strategy. Family, I guess. I shouldered my bag. The real kind. Outside, the morning sun caught the edge of the moving truck's metal side, flashing like a signal. Mom squeezed my arm. Where to? I thought of Samantha in Dubai, of Sarah's quiet revenge, of Greg's tears on national television. Of all the ways people choose to heal or hurt or move forward. Somewhere new, I said. Somewhere without ghosts. The truck pulled away from the curb, carrying the physical remnants of my old life. But the lessons about power, about choice, about the fine line between justice and vengeance, those would stay with me. Greg had taught me how to destroy someone's world. My family had taught me how to rebuild my own. I chose the latter. Through the cafe window, I saw Sarah raise her coffee cup in a final salute. On the TV above her, Greg's face had been replaced by the next story, the next scandal, the next cycle of revenge and redemption. I didn't look back.
My name's Lana, just a regular girl who ended up pouring drinks at Joe's bar downtown after high school. It wasn't anything fancy, but it paid the bills and kept me busy. That's where I first laid eyes on Daniel. It was a Thursday night, the kind where the bar was buzzing but not too packed, just how I like it. In walked this guy, Daniel, with a few of his buddies. Right off, he stuck out. Not because he was loud or anything, he was the calm kind, the kind that had an easy smile and a look in his eyes that said he knew something you didn't. He sauntered over to the bar and took a seat right in front of where I was working. "Hey," he said, flashing that grin. "What's good here, besides the view?" I shot him a look. "Beer's cold, if that's what you mean," I replied, not letting on that I caught his cheeky compliment. His laugh was genuine, and it made me smile despite myself. "I'll take one then, and whatever you recommend for yourself. Let's make it two," he added. Pouring the drinks, I couldn't help but notice the way he watched me, not in a creepy way, but like he was actually interested in what I was doing. "So, you come here often?" I joked as I handed him the beers. "First time, actually. My friend said this place has the best service in town." "Guess they were right," Daniel said, his eyes not leaving mine. We chatted more than I usually did with customers. He told me about his college days, all fancy and full of big words I didn't bother to remember. And I told him about growing up here in town, how I always thought I'd do something more but never figured out what that more was. "You're interesting, Lana," he said out of the blue. "Not like the usual crowd in here." I raised an eyebrow. "Thanks, I guess. You're not too bad yourself, for a rich boy." He laughed again, that sound that filled up the space around us. "Rich boy, huh? Trust me, having money's not all it's cracked up to be." We got interrupted then by his friends, who were ready to move on to some club or another. He stood up, tossed a 50 on the bar, way too much for 2 beers, and winked. "Maybe I'll find that right company if I come back here." And just like that, he was gone, melting into the crowd with his friends. But something about him lingered, like the echo of his laugh in my ears, making me wonder if I'd see him again. Daniel started showing up at the bar every single night after that first encounter. At first, I figured he was just like any other guy, killing time with a beer and small talk. But then, the talks got longer and a whole lot more personal. He'd settle into his usual spot, and as I wiped down the counter or restocked the shelves, he'd tell me bits and pieces about his life, his family. "My dad's pretty big into politics," he'd say with a casual shrug, like he was talking about the weather, not dropping that his father was one of the state's top politicians. "And Mom, well, she's a housewife, keeps everything running smooth at home." The more we talked, the more I saw past the polished surface. Sure, he had money and a name that opened doors, but there was something else, something real that I couldn't quite put my finger on. And despite my better judgment, I found myself looking forward to those evenings when he'd show up. One night, it all changed. He came in looking serious, his usual smile nowhere in sight. "Lana, I've been thinking," he started, hesitating a bit. "How about we go out tomorrow? Somewhere nice, not just here." It was sudden, but not unwelcome. "Like a date?" I asked, trying to sound cool but feeling my heart thump a little harder. "Yeah, a date," he confirmed, his smile back as if he'd won some sort of victory seeing my reaction. That date led to another and another. Before I knew it, we were seeing each other every day. Daniel talked about his life, and I shared mine. He'd laugh off the differences, saying, "Wealth's my only drawback, you know." But it wasn't just his wealth. Daniel loved the high life, parties, late nights, the kind of leisure I could hardly imagine. He brushed off my concerns with a wave. "Things will change, Lana. You'll see." Then came the night he wanted me to meet his parents. I was a bundle of nerves. We drove up to their mansion, the kind of place you see in movies, with sprawling gardens and more rooms than you'd know what to do with. His mother, Mrs. Patricia Gilmore, was as chilly as the marble floors, sizing me up like I was something she'd found stuck to her shoe. "A waitress," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Really, Daniel, you expect her to fit into our world?" His father, Gerald Gilmore, however, beamed at me as if I was the first honest thing he'd seen in years. "Lana, dear, it's refreshing to see someone from real life. You're just what we need. A bridge to the common man, right before the elections." I didn't know whether to be flattered or offended. The dinner was tense, Mrs. Gilmore sniping comments under her breath, Mr. Gilmore countering with grand declarations about my refreshing simplicity. At one point, Mrs. Gilmore had enough, standing up so fast her chair almost toppled over. "I will not stand for this," she hissed, storming out of the room. Mr. Gilmore just winked at me across the table. "Don't you worry, Lana. Everything will be just fine." That wink was supposed to reassure me, but it felt like I was being swept into a game I didn't know how to play. Weeks later, Daniel got down on one knee, right there in the bar where we first met, with the same cheeky grin he had that first night. "Marry me, Lana, and let's show them all how it's done," he said. And I, lost in the moment and in him, said yes. The wedding was anything but the quiet affair I'd hoped for. From the moment Daniel popped the question, his father took over the whole show. He insisted on a grand ceremony, one that would be talked about far and wide. "It'll be perfect for the campaign," he'd say with a sly grin, every time I brought up keeping things small. So, there I was, standing in a dress fancier than anything I'd ever owned, with cameras flashing in my face as I tried to keep my smile from faltering. The reporters swarmed around us, and Mr. Gilmore relished every moment, playing the gracious father-in-law to perfection. "See, folks, this is what real love looks like. Unity across different worlds," he announced to the cameras, slinging his arm around me a little too tightly. I glanced over at my parents, sitting off to the side, their expressions a mix of awe and discomfort. They weren't used to this kind of spectacle, and frankly, neither was I. Mrs. Gilmore, decked out in a dress that probably cost more than my dad's car, pasted on a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She leaned in during the photo op, whispering through clenched teeth, "Smile, Lana. Today, we're all family." After the spectacle, Daniel and I moved into a luxury apartment, a stark contrast to my modest childhood home. It was a wedding gift from his parents, lavish and sprawling, located in one of the city's most exclusive buildings. Daniel's nights out with his friends became more frequent, and I found myself alone in our expansive living space more often than not. His mother, Mrs. Gilmore, took it upon herself to drop by unannounced, always with a critique ready at her lips. One such afternoon, she found me trying to straighten up the mess from one of Daniel's late-night gatherings. She surveyed the room with a disdainful eye before fixing her gaze on me. "Lana, this isn't some roadside diner. You need to keep a better eye on Daniel. Look at him, he's out all the time, drinking, and it's your job to rein him in." I bristled at her words, my hands clenching the dishcloth tighter. "And what exactly do you suggest I do, Mrs. Gilmore? Chain him to a chair?" Her lips thinned into a line. "Don't be smart, Lana. You need to take control. Otherwise, you're just as much to blame." The air was tense between us, the only sounds the soft tick of the expensive clock on the wall and the distant hum of city life outside the windows. That night, when Daniel came home, I tried to talk to him about it. "Your mom thinks I'm not doing enough to keep you in line," I said, trying to keep my voice even. Daniel's reaction was immediate and heated. "You gonna listen to her? Let's not let her get between us, okay? I love you, Lana. We'll figure this out together." But as the weeks rolled on, nothing changed. Daniel's assurances felt more and more hollow, and I found myself questioning whether love was enough to bridge the chasm that seemed to be widening between us. Living the high life wasn't all it was cracked up to be, not by a long shot. I found myself constantly tidying our massive apartment, cooking meals that often went cold before Daniel got home, and hustling laundry to and from the cleaners, all while holding down my shifts at Joe's bar. Meanwhile, Daniel, with no job on his horizon, seemed content to blow through his hefty allowance on nights out with his friends. Daniel's mother, the queen of high society gossip, made sure everyone knew her twisted version of our life. According to her, I was the villain, a dumb, greedy woman who led her poor son astray with my low-class ways. It was a normal day at the bar when she decided to bring her highfalutin friends for a casual lunch. The moment they strutted in, I knew I was in for it. They perched at the bar, their noses turned up like they smelled something foul. Mrs. Gilmore waved me over with a flick of her wrist, her voice loud enough to turn a few heads. "Lana, darling, could you hurry up? We don't have all day, and we expect proper service even in this establishment." Her friend snickered, their eyes scanning the bar with barely disguised contempt. I forced a smile, taking their orders while my hands itched to dump a tray of drinks right into their laps. "Make sure the glasses are clean, dear. We wouldn't want to catch anything," one of her cronies quipped, her laughter sharp as shattered glass. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, my tone syrupy sweet. I delivered their drinks and food with a smile plastered on, though inside I felt anything but cheerful. As I passed by with another order, Mrs. Gilmore grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "You know, Lana, it's a shame you don't use your husband's money to better yourself. Maybe some classes in etiquette? Or a seminar on how to be a supportive wife?" I pulled away gently, keeping my voice steady. "I appreciate the advice, Mrs. Gilmore. I'll give it all the consideration it deserves." The bar couldn't close fast enough that day. Each comment, each condescending look from that table, added weight to the growing dread that this was my life now, scrutinized and scorned, no matter how hard I tried. Back at our apartment, the silence was a stark contrast to the chaos at the bar. Daniel was out again, the note on the fridge a weak apology for missing dinner. I was left alone with my thoughts, which were as cluttered as the untouched plates on our dining table. Meanwhile, I started paying the bills from my own tips, because Daniel's idea of budgeting was seeing how quickly he could spend his money each month. Groceries, utilities, even the damn cable bill, I covered them all. His promises to get his act together and find a job were as empty as our conversations. The election season was in full swing, and Mr. Gilmore was more eager than ever to parade me around at every possible public event. He'd introduce me with great fanfare, always emphasizing how his son had married a simple girl from the people. At rallies, dinners, and interviews, I wore my smile like a mask, nodding and playing the part of the approachable daughter-in-law. But behind the smiles and the polite applause, I was weary. The constant scrutiny, the endless small talk with people who cared more about my story as a campaign tool than as a person, it was exhausting. More than once, I found myself eyeing the exits at these events, longing for nothing more than to run out and never look back. One evening, after yet another fundraiser that had stretched on for hours, Mr. Gilmore pulled me aside, his hand gripping my shoulder a little too firmly. "Lana, I need you to keep this up. You know, your cooperation is crucial. Remember, your lifestyle, this apartment, it's all thanks to our support." I nodded, the thread in his tone clear as glass. "Of course, Mr. Gilmore. I understand." It wasn't just the campaign that was putting pressure on me. Things at home were no better. Daniel's behavior had escalated from neglect to outright destructiveness. He'd come home late, if he came home at all, often drunk and sometimes barely able to stand. Then came the night that changed everything. Daniel stumbled through the door well past midnight, his face ashen, eyes wild with panic. He collapsed onto the sofa, his hands shaking. "Lana, I've screwed up," he blurted out, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I owe money, a lot of money. To some really bad people. I lost it at the casino, and they're not the type to wait for their cash." My stomach twisted at his words. "How much?" "70,000. He murmured, looking away. I felt cold all over. $70,000? He nodded, miserable. "I need your help, Lana. Please, I can't ask my parents. They'd disown me." The desperation in his eyes was something I couldn't ignore. He grabbed my hands, his grip tight. "I swear, Lana, if you help me with this, I'll change. I know I've been a terrible husband, but I'll do anything to make this right. Please." Something in me broke then. Despite the anger and the disappointment, I couldn't let him face this alone. "Okay, Daniel. I'll help you. But this is it. You have to turn things around." I took out a loan the next day, $70,000 that felt like a noose around my neck. But as I handed the money over, Daniel was like a man reborn. He helped around the house, cut back on the drinking, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I let myself believe that we could actually make this work. We spent evenings together, talking about plans for the future, even daring to dream about starting a family. Daniel was attentive, helping with chores, sharing meals at the same table, things we hadn't done in years. "Maybe we should think about having a kid," he suggested one night as we cleaned up after dinner. I looked at him, surprised but not unhappy at the thought. "Really? You think we're ready?" He smiled, pulling me close. "Yeah, I do. I mean, we're getting back on track, right? A fresh start." I wanted to believe him, to believe in us. And in those moments, it was easy to imagine that everything could actually be okay, that the debts and lies were behind us. But that illusion shattered the night I came home from a double shift at the bar. Tossing my keys on the counter, I headed for the bedroom, my body aching for just a few hours of sleep before doing it all over again. But the scene I walked into snapped me wide awake. Daniel was passed out on our bed, snoring loudly, with two girls I'd never seen before curled up beside him, both just as unconscious. Bottles and glasses littered the nightstand, the stench of alcohol heavy in the air. My heart hammered against my ribcage as a cold rage settled in my gut. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone and started recording. The camera's light cut through the darkness, capturing the damning scene. I nudged Daniel awake, my voice sharp. "Daniel, who are these girls?" He blinked up at me, confused and still drunk, then waved a dismissive hand as if brushing away the question. "They're just my girlfriends, you know? It's not a big deal. We do this sometimes when you're at work." That was it. The final betrayal. I stopped the recording, my hands trembling with a cocktail of emotions, rage, sorrow, disbelief. I stepped out of the room, dialed Mr. Gilmore, and waited for him to pick up. "Lana? What's wrong?" His voice was cautious, alert. "Mr. Gilmore, I'm done. I just caught Daniel in our bed with two other women. I've recorded everything, and I want a divorce," I said, each word measured, heavy with finality. He was at the apartment within the hour, his face a mask of controlled fury as he glanced at the still unconscious figures in my bed. Daniel had woken up by then, looking sheepish and scared as his father berated him in hushed, vicious tones. "You idiot! Look what you've done!" Turning to me, Mr. Gilmore's tone softened. "Lana, I'll handle this. Let's keep it quiet, for everyone's sake. What do you need?" $500,000, the apartment sold and the money transferred to me, and the loan I took out for him cleared, I stated, each demand non-negotiable. Mr. Gilmore nodded slowly, calculating. "Done. But you must agree to keep this quiet. Move away, start fresh somewhere else. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said simply. There was nothing left for me here, no reason to stay. "And Lana, don't tell his mother. She'd make a scene, and we can't afford that now, not with the elections." The divorce papers came through quietly. I signed them in the dim light of dawn, alone. Mr. Gilmore kept his word. The money was in my account within days, the loan was paid off, and I was free from Daniel and his destructive whims. Settling into my new life in another city felt like breathing fresh air after being submerged underwater for too long. The day I moved into my new apartment in a peaceful neighborhood, I knew I had made the right decision. It was smaller than the luxurious prison I'd left behind, but it was all mine. The first thing I did after unpacking was block every number associated with my old life. Every ring was a potential drag back into that mess, and I wasn't about to let that happen. Then, I went out and bought myself a car. Nothing too fancy, but sleek and new, something just for me. A few days later, I landed a job as an administrator at a local restaurant. It was a step up from waitressing, with regular hours and no late nights. The owner, a wiry woman named Carla, with a sharp tongue and a no-nonsense attitude, took me under her wing. "You new to town?" Carla asked on my first day, eyeing me with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Yeah, just moved in," I replied, keeping my past tucked away like the folded boxes in my closet. Carla nodded, as if approving my concise answer. "Well, here's your desk, and here are your responsibilities. You keep things running smooth. and we'll get along just fine. I appreciate it, Carla. I won't let you down, I promised, eager to prove my worth in this new role. The job was busy, filled with the usual chaos of restaurant life, but I thrived on the structure it brought to my days. I was making my own money, controlling my own fate. It felt good, honest and real. Encouraged by Carla's blunt but fair management style, I decided to enroll in the local college. I wanted more than just to escape my past, I wanted to build something lasting. Night classes in business management seemed like the right path, and stepping into the classroom, I felt a surge of pride. I was doing this for me, no one else. One evening, as I was locking up the restaurant, Carla stopped by my desk. "Heard you're hitting the books at night. That's good. Keep that brain working." I smiled, grateful for her recognition. "Trying to. Figured it's never too late to start fresh, right?" "Damn right," Carla said with a nod. "You ever need help, you let me know. I know a thing or two about keeping a business above water." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work, study, and the quiet solitude of my apartment. I relished the normalcy, the mundane moments that I used to take for granted. It was during one of these quiet nights, sitting on my balcony with a cup of tea, that I realized just how much I had changed. The city lights sparkled in the distance, each one a reminder of where I'd been and where I was heading. 2 years had slipped by since I cut all ties with my old life and started anew. I was sitting in my living room, cozy and warm, a book forgotten on my lap, when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and hesitating for a split second, I answered. "Lana, this is Patricia Gilmore." The voice came through, high-pitched and frantic. "Daniel is in trouble because of your negligence." I was taken aback. "Mrs. Gilmore, slow down. What are you talking about? What trouble?" She was nearly breathless with agitation. "An unknown friend of Daniel called me. He said Daniel got into a fight with a policeman in a bar. I had to transfer money to keep him out of jail. I took it from our savings, and Gerald doesn't know yet." "Why weren't you there for him?" "Mrs. Gilmore, listen to me very carefully," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Daniel and I have been divorced for 2 years. I haven't seen or spoken to him since." There was a pause, and then, "Divorced? What are you talking about? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "You didn't know because it was meant to be kept quiet for the family's sake, for the election and all. I'm sorry you were left out, but I am no longer part of Daniel's life or your family." "And what happened to the policeman and Daniel?" Her voice cracked, and I could hear the confusion and fear seeping through. Laughing softly, I tried to find some humor in the absurdity of the situation. "Mrs. Gilmore, you've been scammed. There's no doubt about it. These scammers probably made up the whole story about the policeman just to trick you out of your money." There was a pause on the line as the realization sank in. Her voice quivered, fear replacing the anger from moments before. "Scammed? Oh no, what have I done?" Her tone was frantic, the weight of her mistake crashing down. "Can't you just lend me some money to put back before Gerald finds out?" "Please, Lana." "Mrs. Gilmore, I can't. It's not my place anymore. I've moved on. You need to handle this with your family," I replied, firm yet not unkind. Her crying intensified, then turned to anger. "You could help, but you choose not to. You're just as selfish as everyone said." I sighed, a deep, weary release. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I truly hope you sort this out, but I must go now." I hung up before she could reply, her sobs echoing in my ear even after the line went dead. Looking around my peaceful apartment, the stark contrast between my current life and the chaos of the past made me shudder. I picked up my phone again, this time navigating through the settings to block yet another number. As I set the phone down, a sense of finality washed over me. I was truly free now, no longer entangled in the web of deception and greed that had once defined my life. My name is Lillian Carter. I own Carter Colors, a company that's made a big splash in the world of art supplies. I've worked my butt off to get where I am, and at 35, I felt like I was on top of the world. It was at a trade show in New York where my life took a turn that I hadn't seen coming. Walking through the crowded venue, I could hear the buzz about the latest trends in art materials. That's where I bumped into Ethan Gray. You could say he was famous, or more like infamous, in the art circles. His paintings sold for thousands, and his personal life filled just as many gossip columns. Lillian Carter, right? Ethan's voice cut through the noise as he approached my booth, his eyes scanning the vibrant display of aerosol paints. That's me, I replied, extending a hand. And you're Ethan Gray. Seen your work, heard a lot more. He flashed a grin, his gaze still lingering on the cans. We ended up talking over drinks after the show. Ethan was charming, no doubt about it, and he knew how to make a girl feel like she was the only one in the room. So, Lillian, how'd you get into this gig? Ethan asked, swirling his drink. Started in my garage. Just me, some paint, and too many ideas. Now it's this, I said, spreading my arms wide. What about you? Always a painter? Kind of fell into it, he shrugged. But let's talk more about you. Your stuff's everywhere. Bet you're killing it. The conversation flowed as easily as the drinks, and by the end of the night, I was pretty taken with him. Ethan wasn't just interested in my business, he seemed genuinely into me. It was refreshing, considering most men were either intimidated or just wanted to talk shop. A few months flew by, and Ethan was everywhere I was. Art shows, gallery openings, you name it. He always made sure he was seen with me, and I won't lie, I liked the attention. One evening, as we closed down a particularly successful gallery event, Ethan pulled me aside. The room was buzzing with the last few art enthusiasts, but he had that look in his eyes that said he needed to talk. Lillian, these past months with you have been incredible, he started, his voice low. You're amazing, you know that? I blushed, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. Thanks, Ethan. I've enjoyed it too. A lot. He took a deep breath, his hand finding mine. I don't want to just date, Lillian. I'm in this. All in. What do you say? The question caught me off guard. Here was a man who'd been the talk of the town, known for his fleeting romances, and he was looking at me like I was his next masterpiece. I say, let's do it, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. That night, Ethan asked me to marry him in a way that was both shocking and utterly perfect. It wasn't long before we were planning a wedding that was bound to be as colorful as my paints. After our whirlwind wedding, which was the talk of the town, Ethan and I moved into a spacious new house that I had picked out, imagining kids running around, their laughter filling up the halls. It was a big step, buying that place, but I felt it was right. It felt like our future was starting to take shape right before my eyes. To sweeten our new beginning, I surprised Ethan with a sleek new car. For all the times you'll drive back from your studio, all inspired and messy, I joked as I handed him the keys. He laughed, hugged me tight, and said it was more than he deserved. I got one for myself too, so I guess we both deserve the best, I shot back with a grin. Ethan continued working out of his old studio across town, despite my suggestions to set one up at home. Babe, I'm a creature of habit. That old studio, it's got the vibes, the history. Can't just leave that behind, he'd explain every time I brought it up. I didn't push it, I respected his space and his process. Plus, I was busy too, launching a new store downtown, expanding Carter Colors. One evening, as we were relaxing on our back porch, Ethan brought up a new project he was dreaming about. Lil, I've got this idea, something big. But I'm a bit strapped right now, he said, looking out into the yard, his voice unusually hesitant. What kind of big? I asked, intrigued. A new series of paintings. Different from anything I've done before. I want to experiment, push boundaries, he explained, his eyes lighting up as he spoke. That sounds amazing, Ethan. So, what's holding you back? I leaned in, always excited to see him passionate about his work. Funds, babe. It's a costly venture, and I'm a bit tight financially. I need $100,000, he admitted, scratching the back of his head. Without a second thought, I replied, "Why didn't you just say so? Let's finance it." "Lillian, you are incredible. Seriously, the most generous woman in the world," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I brushed off his praise with a wave of my hand. "Stop it. Just go make those masterpieces." The money went into his account, and soon after, Ethan's project kicked off. We'd go to his exhibitions together, and it was hard not to feel proud as I watched him talk about his art, the crowds hanging on his every word. I felt like we were a power couple, making our marks in our respective fields. One night, after an especially successful opening, we celebrated over dinner. "You see, Lil, this is all because of you. You inspire me," Ethan said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Nah, it's all you, babe. I just provided the canvas, you're the one making the magic happen," I replied, squeezing back. "But seriously, I don't know what I'd do without you," he continued, his gaze intense. "Let's not find out, okay?" I joked, trying to keep the mood light. As we clinked glasses, I felt like everything was falling into place. The night of Ethan's birthday was supposed to be perfect. I had everything planned down to the last detail: dinner at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, followed by a helicopter ride over the glittering skyline. I wore my favorite red dress, the one Ethan said made me look like $1,000,000. I arrived early, a bundle of nerves and excitement. The maitre d' showed me to our table, a secluded spot with a view of the city lights. I ordered a glass of wine and waited, my heart pounding with anticipation. Half an hour late, Ethan finally walked in, but not alone. My heart sank as I saw him enter with a young woman on his arm, laughing at something he'd said. My stomach churned as they approached the table. "Lillian, I need to talk to you," Ethan said, his voice serious all of a sudden. I looked from him to the woman, my eyes wide. "This better be good, Ethan. Who's this?" "This is Lana," he introduced her, and she gave me a small, almost mocking wave. "Look, Lillian, I'll be straight with you. I've fallen for Lana. We're in love, and I'm going to marry her." His words hit like a punch to the gut. Lana, standing a bit too close to Ethan, looked at me with a smirk. "Sorry you had to find out this way," she said, her tone anything but apologetic. Ethan handed me an envelope. "I've filed for divorce. And I'll need half of everything we acquired together." I stared at the papers in my hands, my whole body shaking. I felt numb, unable to fully grasp the betrayal. The love and life I thought we were building crumbled before my eyes. As they turned to leave, Lana glanced back and waved at me with a malicious smile. The sight of it filled me with a cold rage. But I just sat there, silent, watching them walk away. After they left, I downed my wine in one gulp and dialed Laura, my best friend. She picked up on the first ring. "Laura, it's me. Can I come over? It's Ethan, he's leaving me. For another woman." "Oh, Lil, I'm so sorry. Come right over, honey. We'll figure this out." I left the restaurant and headed straight to Laura's. The drive over was a blur, my mind racing and heartbreaking. When I arrived, Laura was waiting at the door, her face full of concern. Inside, we sat on the couch, and I poured out the whole sordid story. Laura listened, her face growing angrier by the minute. "He wants what? Half of everything? That no good, too timing." "Yeah, the house, the cars, even the new store," I said, my voice hollow. "I bought all that thinking we were building a future." "We need to fight back, Lillian. This is outright theft." Laura's outrage mirrored my own. "Let's find someone who can dig up dirt on him. If he's been planning this, who knows what else he's hiding." That night, I slept at Laura's place, my dreams a chaotic swirl of betrayal and whispered plans of revenge. The fight was just beginning, and I was ready to claim what was rightfully mine. The next morning, we were running on adrenaline and caffeine, ready to set our plan into motion. We found a private detective named Hank through a recommendation, and we wasted no time meeting him to discuss our situation. Morning, ladies. What brings you to my part of town? Hank asked, his office cluttered with files and old coffee cups. Morning, Hank. We've got a bit of a situation. My soon-to-be ex-husband, he's pulled a fast one on me. I began, trying to keep my voice steady. Laura jumped in, her voice firm. We need dirt, Hank. The kind that sticks. This guy's been playing my friend here for a fool, and we're not about to let him get away with it. Got it. Names, places, any details you've got. I'll start digging. Hank's fingers flew over his keyboard as we provided him with everything he needed. Over the next week, Laura and I were on edge, waiting for any news. Finally, Hank called us back to his office, with a grim look on his face. Found more than I bargained for, he said, handing us a thick file. Your guy, he's been seeing this mistress of his for months. Fancy trips, expensive gifts, and yeah, that new apartment on the coast? It's in his name, bought with your money. The betrayal stung anew, but now it was mixed with a fiery anger. Can we make this public? I mean, legally? I asked, thumbing through the documents. Laura, ever the strategist, had another idea. Wait, my cousin's a producer for that morning talk show, Daybreak Delights. What if Lillian goes public there? A live tell-all? Perfect. Let's burn his little castle down with the truth, I agreed, feeling a surge of empowerment. We arranged for me to appear on the show. The night before, I was a bundle of nerves, but Laura stayed on the phone with me, rehearsing what I would say. The morning of the show, I sat across from the host, a sympathetic woman named Marcy. Today, we have Lillian Carter, who's here to share a troubling personal story involving deception and betrayal. Lillian? Taking a deep breath, I looked into the camera. Thank you, Marcy. Yes, I'm here because I believe in standing up against deceit. My husband, whom I trusted with my heart and my finances, has been living a double life. With my money, he funded his affairs and lied about his business ventures. The host interjected, "And you have proof of these claims?" I nodded, passing over the documents Hank had compiled. Receipts, bank statements, even property deeds. All funded through the money I gave him, believing in his integrity. The response was immediate. Viewers began commenting, the phone started ringing, and by the end of the day, I had messages from several of Ethan's ex-wives. They shared similar stories of deception and theft. Bolstered by public support, I filed a lawsuit against Ethan for fraud. The case quickly became a local sensation, with more and more people coming forward with their own encounters with Ethan's duplicity. After the initial bombshell on Daybreak Delights, the story of Ethan's duplicity spread like wildfire. Other women, once silenced by fear and shame, now stepped forward, eager to share their stories on the very platform that had emboldened them. The talk show's producers, sensing the depth and reach of the story, organized a special segment. It wasn't just about me or Ethan, it was about a pattern, a repeated betrayal that spanned years and victims. I stood backstage, listening to the quiet murmur of the other women gathering, their voices a mix of nervousness and resolve. Lillian, you ready for this? Laura asked, her hand reassuring on my shoulder. As I'll ever be, I replied, taking a deep breath. It's not just my fight anymore. We walked onto the set, a chorus of applause greeting us. Marcy, the host, welcomed each of us with a warmth that eased some of the tension from our shoulders. Ladies, thank you for being here today, Marcy started, her voice serious, her eyes sweeping across the group. What you're doing is incredibly brave. Lillian, can you introduce us to these courageous women? With a nod, I turned slightly to address the audience, both in the studio and beyond the cameras. These women, like me, were charmed by a man we thought we knew. But behind the love and promises were lies that cost us more than just broken hearts. They cost us our trust, our security. One by one, the women shared their tales. The pattern was starkly similar: whirlwind romances, quick commitments, and then the slow, painful realization of being used. He told me he needed money for a new gallery, one woman said, her voice faltering. I sold my late mother's jewelry to help him. And then he vanished. Another spoke up, her anger palpable. He said he was investing in our future, but he was funding his lavish trips with his mistresses. The trial that followed was a media spectacle. Ethan, with his slick lawyers and smoother talk, tried to paint himself as the misunderstood artist, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge ruled in our favor, recognizing the systematic deception Ethan had woven into our lives. The court finds the defendant guilty of fraud and orders restitution to the victims, the judge declared, her gavel a satisfying sound in the heavy silence that followed. However, the aftermath was as surprising as the ordeal itself. Ethan's notoriety, rather than crippling his career, seemed to enhance it. His art, now more infamous than ever, skyrocketed in value. The scandal, it seemed, was a perverse sort of publicity. Months after the trial, Ethan's voice unexpectedly filled my living room, his laughter ringing through the phone in a call I never expected to receive. "Lillian, darling, I must thank you," he sneered, his voice oozing false sweetness. "What are you talking about, Ethan?" I replied, my grip tightening around the phone. "Oh, come now. Thanks to your little stunt, my paintings are selling at triple the price. Scandal really does wonders for the art world," he boasted, arrogance dripping from every word. I was silent, processing his audacity. "And to top it off," he continued, the smirk practically audible, "I've married again. A young, beautiful thing. Far superior to you in every way." His words were meant to wound, and they did, momentarily. But as he laughed and hung up, a fire built inside me. Hank called on time, at a time when I was considering new ways to get back at Ethan. "Lillian, you're gonna want to sit down for this," Hank's voice was thick with urgency. "What's up, Hank? What did you find now?" My heart skipped a beat, wondering what bombshell was left to drop. "It's big, Lil. I mean, career-ending big for Ethan. Meet me as soon as you can," he said. I agreed, curiosity and a twinge of that old, familiar rage stirring in my belly. At Hank's office, the evidence laid out was undeniable, shocking even to me, seasoned by now in Ethan's capacity for deceit. But this was different. This was massive. Armed with the new information, I couldn't just walk away. Not when justice was screaming to be served one final time. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Ethan was being celebrated at a high-profile art exhibition. Politicians, business moguls, the who's who of society would be there. And so, I decided, would I, with a +1 whose identity would shake the very foundations of Ethan's pretentious little empire. The night of the exhibition, I was a bundle of nerves and resolve. Beside me was Alex, a shy, young artist with a brilliant talent and a significant role in the night's unfolding drama. As we entered, Ethan, ever the charmer, was surrounded by admirers, his new wife, Lana, glittering beside him. Ethan's eyes narrowed the moment he saw me, his smile faltering as he noticed Alex. His discomfort was palpable, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. As the speeches began, I felt every heartbeat, every tick of the clock acutely. When it came time for Ethan to speak about his original works, I knew it was showtime. "Excuse me, can I have a moment?" I stepped forward, microphone in hand, my voice steady. The room fell silent, all eyes on me. "Thank you," I began, smiling sweetly at the confused faces around me. "I know you're all here to honor Ethan, but I want to introduce you to someone very special. Alex, come up here." Alex joined me, his nervousness clear but his resolve strong. I nodded at him, and he began the slideshow he'd prepared. The first slide displayed a familiar painting, one Ethan claimed as his own. "Lovely, isn't it?" I continued, as slide after slide showed beautiful artworks. All created by Alex here, not by Ethan. The revelation that Ethan Gray had no original talent and had been passing off someone else's art as his own hit the crowd like a tidal wave. The grand hall, once filled with the murmur of admiration, was now abuzz with shock and indignation. Alex stood beside me, his presence calm yet powerful against the storm of reactions. His admission on the stage, backed by undeniable evidence of contracts and payments, mere crumbs compared to the fortunes Ethan had made, was the final nail in the coffin of Ethan's career. I was hired by Ethan years ago, Alex's voice echoed in the hall, now hushed to catch every word. He promised exposure and mentorship, but all I got was a corner in a studio and secrecy, while he sold my work as his own for huge profits. The guests, many of whom were prominent figures in the art world, looked at Ethan with a mix of disbelief and disdain. His shoulders slumped, his usual charm dissipated into the air, leaving behind the shell of a man exposed by his own greed and deceit. One furious collector stood up, his voice booming across the room. "You sold me a lie. I demand a refund, Ethan. How could you?" His outcry was a catalyst. More voices rose in agreement, demanding justice for the deception they had unknowingly supported. Lana, who had been standing by him in what she assumed was her moment of social ascent, now recoiled as if struck. "I didn't sign up to marry a fraud," she yelled, her voice shrill. "We're done, Ethan." She stormed out, her exit as dramatic as the scandal unfolding. Reporters, quick to sense the magnitude of the scandal, began furiously taking notes, their cameras flashing. The air was electric, charged with the thrill of downfall and the drama of truth unveiled. Seeing an opportunity not just for vengeance, but for rightful recognition, I stepped forward once more, seizing the moment to turn the tide. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice clear and commanding over the noise. "Tonight has been a revelation not just of deceit but of true talent. This young man, Alex Mercer, is the real artist behind the paintings you've admired tonight." The room quieted, eyes turning to Alex, who stood a little taller under the gaze of the art world's elite. As his agent, I'm proud to present his genuine work, not just for sale, but for the recognition he rightfully deserves. We welcome galleries, collectors, and art lovers to support true talent, unshadowed by deceit. The shift in the room was palpable. Curiosity replaced shock, and several gallery owners and art dealers approached us, their expressions one of intrigue and respect. "Mr. Mercer, could we discuss potential exhibitions?" one gallery owner asked, her tone eager and genuine. "Absolutely," I replied, smiling at Alex, who was finally receiving the recognition he deserved. As the crowd began to buzz with positive murmurs and discussions of potential deals, I looked over at Ethan, now a bystander in his own downfall. His empire, built on lies and exploitation, had crumbled. 4 years had flown by since that explosive night at the exhibition. Life, it seemed, had settled into a rhythm more beautiful and fulfilling than I ever could have imagined. Alex and I, now not just partners in business but in life, had woven our paths together. The morning light filtered through our bedroom window, casting playful shadows on the wall. Alex, already awake, was sketching by the window, his fingers moving deftly over the paper. Our little boy, Max, was already sitting at the table, munching on his breakfast. "Mommy, look." Max held up his crayon masterpiece, colors sprawling across the page in wild abandon. "That's amazing, buddy. You're gonna be just like Alex," I said, ruffling his hair. Alex joined us, placing a kiss on my head and then on Max's. "He's got your creativity, Lillian. We might have a little artist on our hands." Life had indeed been kind, but it wasn't just our family flourishing. Alex's career as an artist had skyrocketed, his genuine talent now recognized and celebrated far and wide. And me, stepping into the role of his agent, I found a passion for advocating and nurturing real talent, something that gave me a deep sense of fulfillment. As we sat at the breakfast table, the phone rang. I answered, still smiling from our morning banter. "Lillian Carter," I greeted. "Lillian, it's Diane from Galleria Moderna. We just wanted to confirm Alex's solo exhibit next month. We're expecting a massive turnout." "That's fantastic, Diane. We're all set on our end. Alex has some incredible pieces ready to go," I replied, my heart swelling with pride. After the call, I looked over at Alex, who was now helping Max with his crayon choices. "Another packed house expected, Mr. Mercer. Seems you're the man of the hour, yet again." Alex chuckled, wrapping an arm around me. "Only because I have an amazing agent. And the best family a guy could ask for." Our lives were a stark contrast to the chaos that had engulfed Ethan. Plagued by lawsuits from galleries, museums, and private collectors, his world had crumbled. The last we heard, he had fled the country, a broken man chased away by the weight of his own deceit. The scandal that once threatened to stain my life had instead cleared the path to this new beginning. I had not only found success in business, but had found love and built a family on foundations of trust and genuine support. My name's Tasha, and let me tell you about how my world used to be before everything flipped upside down. Back when life was just Dad, Mom, and me, we lived in a big old house with more rooms than I bothered to count. It was peaceful, you know, the kind of place where laughter filled the halls, and there was always some sweet smell wafting from the kitchen. Mom was the heart of our home. She'd wake up singing, her voice floating up the stairs. "Tasha, rise and shine, sweetheart." I'd drag myself out of bed, grumbling like any teenager would, but her bright smile over pancakes made it worth it. Dad, he was the cool one. Always had a joke ready to lighten the mood or a story about his younger days. "When I was your age, I thought I could conquer the world with just a guitar and a bad haircut," he'd say, and we'd laugh, knowing he'd done just fine with a business suit and a level head instead. Life was good. More than good, actually, it was perfect. But as they say, all good things have a way of ending too soon. When Mom got sick, it was like our little paradise started to crumble. I remember the day she told us. We were sitting in the living room, the TV was on but no one was watching. "I have some tough news," she said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying her fear. "Cancer." That word hit me like a ton of bricks. Dad reached for her hand, and they shared a look, a silent promise that they'd fight it together. The months that followed were rough. Hospitals, treatments, Mom losing her hair, but not her spirit. She'd joke about saving money on shampoo, trying to make it easier on us. But I saw the tears she thought she hid, heard the worry in Dad's whispers when he thought I was asleep. The day we lost her, everything changed. Dad and I, we tried to hold on to each other, to keep the pieces of our shattered family together. "We'll get through this, Tasha. We have to," Dad would say, his voice rough, the bags under his eyes getting darker each day. A year later, Dad brought someone new into our home. Victoria. She was like a whirlwind, sweeping in with her perfect hair and sharp clothes, taking over everything Mom had left behind. The first time I met her, she looked me up and down, a smirk playing on her lips as if she'd already figured me out. She walked around, touching Mom's things, rearranging the furniture. "George tells me you're quite the student. I'm sure you won't mind helping out more around here, now that I'm taking care of things." I remember feeling my fists clench at my sides. Help out? This was my home, not some boot camp she could run. But for Dad's sake, I bit my tongue. "Sure, I can do more." Dad seemed to shrink a bit more each day, his laughter not as loud, his stories not as frequent. He was trying, though, for the sake of what he called moving forward. I wasn't so convinced. The new house was twice the size of our old one, and with that came twice the work. The first day we moved in, Victoria was already barking orders, her high heels clicking menacingly on the marble floor as she directed the movers. Once the movers left, she turned her gaze on me. "Tasha, I expect you to take care of your own space. I won't have time to clean up after you." I was leaning against the doorframe, watching her. "Got it," I muttered, already dreading the long list of chores I knew she'd pile on me. "And dinner should be ready by 6 each evening. I assume you can handle that?" There was a challenge in her voice, like she doubted I could boil water without burning it. As the days turned into weeks, the house felt less like home and more like a fancy prison. Dad was out a lot, trying to keep his business afloat, which left me alone with Victoria and her endless list of demands. "Tasha, the living room is dusty." "Tasha, the silver isn't polished." "Tasha, did you forget the dry cleaning?" It was relentless. One afternoon, Dad finally noticed how tense things had become. He found me in the garden, pulling weeds with more force than needed. "Hey, Tasha, you've been quiet lately. Everything okay? I threw a clump of weeds into the bin, wiping sweat off my brow. Just tired, Dad. This place is a lot to keep up with. He looked around, his expression growing thoughtful. Yeah, it's a lot for anyone. Maybe I can talk to Victoria, see if we can hire some help. I almost laughed. Good luck with that. She thinks I'm her personal maid. Dad's face hardened slightly, something I hadn't seen in a while. That's not what I intended when we moved here. I'll handle it, Tasha. You shouldn't have to carry all this weight. But despite his good intentions, conversations with Victoria seemed to go in one ear and out the other. She'd nod, smile that tight-lipped smile of hers, and then it was back to business as usual. Tasha, the hedges are overgrown. Tasha, the guest rooms need fresh linens. It was exhausting, trying to meet her standards. But it made me stubborn, too. I wasn't going to let her break me. I'd do the work, keep my head down, and count the days until I could leave for college. The thought of getting out, of finding my own space where no one could tell me how to mop a floor or when dinner should be on the table, that kept me going. But finally, the day came. I was off to a place where my stepmother's voice couldn't reach me, a city miles away where I could start fresh. I packed up early that morning, each suitcase feeling like a brick in the new foundation I was laying for myself. Dad came out to see me off, his face trying to smile, but I could tell he was torn up about it. Tasha, are you sure you've got everything you need? Dad asked, looking over the pile of bags and boxes. And you'll call if you need anything? Remember, the money for your rent and books, it'll be in your account. Check it when you get there. Dad, relax. I'll be fine. I'm just going to college, not Mars. I was trying to keep it light, to make this easier for him, but my own heart was hammering in my chest. The freedom of living alone was everything I thought it would be, and more. My apartment was small, but it was mine. No one to tell me to clean up, no one to report to, just my own space. My classes were tough, but I was tougher. I was determined to make the most out of this opportunity, studying hard and keeping my grades up. It wasn't long before I realized that living on a tight budget wasn't as easy as I'd thought it would be. Money was always on my mind. I didn't go out much, didn't see the point in blowing cash on parties when I had a goal in mind. Instead, I picked up a part-time job at a local cafe. It wasn't glamorous, but it was income, and every little bit helped. One evening, my coworker, Mike, caught me counting my tips for the third time. He leaned against the counter, a smirk on his face. What, you trying to make those bills multiply by staring at them? I rolled my eyes, shoving the cash into my wallet. Just making sure I got everything. Budgeting isn't exactly a thrill. Mike laughed, pulling off his apron as he prepared to close up. You know, you could ease up a bit. Come out with us tonight. We're just grabbing a drink to unwind. I hesitated. It was tempting, but sorry, I can't. Need to save every penny I earn. Maybe next time. I was here to build a future, one where I'd be financially stable enough to never have to rely on anyone, Victoria or otherwise. I wanted to save enough to buy Dad something nice, something to show him how much I appreciated everything he'd done for me. Just when I thought I had my life at college figured out, everything started to unravel. It began with a call that I never saw coming. Victoria was on the other line, her voice cool and detached as she delivered the news that would turn my world upside down. Tasha, your father's hit a rough patch financially, she said without a hint of sympathy. We're tightening belts around here, and, unfortunately, this means we can't send you money for your rent anymore. The line went dead before I could protest further. I was stunned, the reality of my situation slowly setting in. No more money meant no more apartment on my own, no more safety net. I had to act fast. I explained my situation to Jenny, my college friend and classmate. She was as kind-hearted as they come, always ready to lend a hand or an ear, whichever you needed more. Tasha, that's awful. Look, why don't you move in with me? We could split the rent, and it'll be cheaper for both of us, she offered, while we were studying in the library. Moving in with Jenny was a breath of fresh air during a suffocating time. We shared costs, which made life somewhat more manageable, but just as I was adjusting to this new normal, another blow came 6 months later. Victoria messaged me on a social network this time. No more money for tuition either. Your father's situation hasn't improved. You need to stand on your own now. Reading those words, I felt a mix of anger and despair. My savings were meager at best, eaten away by bills and necessities. I tightened my budget even further, cutting down on everything non-essential, especially food. Meals became smaller, more about sustenance than enjoyment, and my clothes started hanging looser on my frame. One evening, Jenny knocked on my door, her arms laden with grocery bags. She must have noticed my weight loss. Hey, I picked up some extra stuff. Made too much dinner, too. You should come eat with us. I peeked out, seeing the warm light and smelling the food from the kitchen. My stomach growled, but I shook my head. Thanks, Jen, but I can't. I need to save every penny. I've got to pay for tuition somehow. Jenny frowned, setting her jaw stubbornly. Tasha, you need to eat. And you're not paying for this, okay? It's just leftovers. I wanted to argue, to maintain that thread of independence I was clinging to, but another growl from my stomach betrayed me. Okay, maybe just a little. Thanks, Jen. As the semester wore on, I threw myself into my studies with even more fervor, if that was possible. The only way out of this financial mess was through scholarships, and I wasn't about to let anything jeopardize that. Jenny often tried to coax me into taking breaks, coming to parties, or just hanging out with friends. Tasha, come on, you can't study all the time. Come out with us tonight. It'll be fun, and you need a break. I always had the same answer. I can't, Jen. I really need to ace these exams. But you're always working or studying. When do you ever relax? Jenny protested, her concern evident. Relaxing doesn't pay the bills, I replied curtly, my eyes never leaving my books. As the pressure mounted, my body began to feel the strain. Long hours at my jobs, followed by longer nights of studying, left me exhausted, running on fumes. But I couldn't stop, not when I was so close to earning that scholarship, not when my entire future was on the line. The shift at the diner had dragged on forever, and by the time I clocked out, the sun was already painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. Exhausted didn't even begin to cover how I felt, but classes waited for no one, and I had a midterm to prepare for. Dragging my feet to my apartment, I planned to grab a quick shower and head straight to campus. However, as I reached for my keys, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The world spun wildly, and the ground seemed to rush up to meet me. The last thing I remembered was the cold pavement against my cheek, then darkness. I woke up with a start, the sterile smell of antiseptic flooding my senses. Blinking against the harsh fluorescent lights, I found myself in a hospital bed, and 4 drip attached to my arm, and Jenny sitting by my side, her expression a mix of relief and worry. Tasha, you're awake. God, you scared me. I found you passed out outside your apartment, Jenny said, her voice shaky. You collapsed, Tasha. The doctors said you're severely malnourished and dehydrated. You've been pushing yourself too hard. You need to rest. Rest was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not now. Not with everything hanging by a thread. But arguing felt like running a marathon, and I didn't have the energy. After a couple of days under observation, I was discharged with strict instructions to take it easy. Instructions that might as well have been written in sand for all the good they did. I headed straight home, my body weak, but my mind racing with all the things I needed to catch up on. Once home, I tried calling Dad. I needed to hear his voice, to tell him what happened. Maybe, just maybe, he could help. But the calls went straight to voicemail. Frustrated and feeling more alone than ever, I dialed Victoria's number next. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Yes? It's Tasha. I started, but the words tangled up, thick with emotions I couldn't control. Your father is out of the country. Business. she interrupted sharply. And before you ask, no, we can't help. You're on your own. Her words hit like a slap. But There's nothing more to discuss, Tasha. You're an adult. Handle it. The line went dead, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. I sat there, phone in hand, the weight of her dismissal crushing. It was then, in that quiet apartment, that the reality of my situation truly sank in. I was alone. Utterly and completely. Exams were creeping up, looming over me like dark clouds ready to burst. The stress was a tangible thing, wrapping its fingers around my throat, making it hard to breathe. To keep up with my studies, I had no choice but to let go of one of my jobs. Money, already a trickle, now felt like it had dried up to a few last drops. Sitting across from Jenny in the little diner we frequented, I fiddled with the edge of the menu, my stomach growling but my wallet painfully thin. Stop looking at the prices, Tasha. I've got this, okay? Jenny said, her voice firm but gentle. She was trying to be supportive, but accepting help never got easier. I'll pay you back. Every cent, I muttered, feeling the weight of each word. Jenny rolled her eyes, a smile tugging at her lips. Yeah, I know. Just order something hearty, alright? You look like you could use it. Reluctantly, I ordered the cheapest meal, my pride aching with every word. But Jenny was right, I needed the energy, especially now. As the exams rolled in, one after the other, I poured everything I had into them. Nights blurred into days, textbooks and notes scattered around me like a fortress. When the results came in, I couldn't believe my eyes, straight A's. A tuition bonus followed, a small but significant light at the end of a very dark tunnel. I should have been over the moon, but all I could do was collapse into bed, my body and mind shutting down from sheer exhaustion. I slept for days, missing calls and messages, the world moving on without me. One night, wrapped in the solitude of my small apartment, I dreamt of Mom. She was in our old kitchen, humming a tune, her smile warm and inviting. Tasha, come here, sweetheart, she called, her voice a soft echo of better days. In my dream, I went to her, basking in the feeling of being home, being safe. But as dreams do, it ended, and I woke up in tears, the ache in my chest raw and fierce. The emptiness of the apartment was suffocating, and a desperate need to connect with her overwhelmed me. I made a decision then, one that felt like grasping at straws but necessary. I would go back to my hometown, visit her grave, and maybe, just maybe, find some of that peace I saw in my dream. Checking my bank account, I calculated what I could afford, a cheap bus ticket, the cheapest I could find. Work could do without me for a couple of days, I wasn't much use to them or anyone else in my current state anyway. Jen, I'm going home for a couple of days, I told her over the phone, my voice more steady than I felt. Home? There was a pause, and I could picture her brow furrowing in concern. Are you sure that's a good idea? Okay, but call me, alright? Anytime, day or night. Promise? Promise, I said, feeling a thread of warmth at her concern. The journey back was a blur, my thoughts a tangled mess of memories and what-ifs. As the bus rolled into the familiar streets of my hometown, a mixture of dread and longing settled in my stomach. It was supposed to be a simple visit, a moment to feel close to Mom again, but as I walked among the familiar gravestones, a figure in the distance caught my eye. My heart skipped, tall, with a familiar stoop of the shoulders, kneeling by a grave. My pace quickened, disbelief and hope churning within me. Dad? My voice was tentative, almost afraid to shatter the fragile moment. The figure turned, and our eyes met. There was a flicker of confusion, then recognition, and something that looked a lot like sorrow. Tasha? His voice broke, raw with emotion. It had been so long. I ran to him, no longer caring about the cold or the tears that had started to spill over. Dad, what are you doing here? He rose quickly, nearly stumbling in his haste, and enveloped me in his arms. I was suddenly 5 years old again, safe and cherished. I had a dream about your mother, he confessed, pulling back just enough to see my face. She told me to come here today. I gasped, the parallel too stark to ignore. I had a dream about her, too. That's why I'm here. Dad wiped away my tears with an old handkerchief, rough and a bit frayed. Seems like she's still looking out for us, huh? Yeah, seems like it, I agreed, laughter mingling with my tears. We should talk, Tasha. Come back to the house with me, Dad suggested, his tone hopeful yet cautious. I hesitated, images of Victoria's cold stares flashing through my mind. Are you sure? What about Victoria? She'll manage. You're my daughter, and we have a lot to catch up on. His voice held a firmness I hadn't heard in a long time. The ride to the house was filled with an awkward yet comforting silence. When we arrived, Victoria was in the front yard, pruning roses with sharp snips that seemed to echo her mood. Tasha? What are you doing here? She stood up straight, her eyes narrowing as she took in my presence. I stepped forward, bolstered by Dad's presence. I came to see Dad. We have some things to talk about. Dad nodded at Victoria. Why don't you make us some dinner? We'll be inside. Her mouth tightened, but she nodded stiffly and headed inside. Dad led me into the living room, a space that once felt warm but now seemed curated for appearance rather than comfort. The tension in the dining room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Victoria, looking paler than usual, was fussing about leaving the house on some urgent errand, but Dad's voice stopped her cold. Sit down, we're not done here. Reluctantly, Victoria sat, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. Dad turned his attention to me, his brow furrowed in concern. Tasha, you've lost so much weight. Are you on some sort of diet? I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. Diet? Hardly. It's not choice, Dad, it's necessity. I've been struggling to make ends meet because I've been paying for my tuition and all my living expenses by myself. His confusion was apparent. What are you talking about? I've been sending $3,000 every month to cover your expenses. It's been sent to your account on the 15th every month without fail. I stared at him, stunned. What? Dad, I haven't seen a dime of that money for the last 2 years. I've been working 2 jobs just to pay my bills and tuition. The color drained from Dad's face as he turned to Victoria. Is this true? Where's the money, Victoria? Victoria stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I needed it. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. Dad's voice was a low growl. Tell me everything, now. She hesitated, then spilled the beans. I got involved in a financial pyramid scheme. I thought I could make a quick buck, turn around our financial woes, but I ended up in debt. The people I dealt with, they're not the kind you say no to. I used Tasha's money to pay them off. I thought I could replace it before anyone noticed. Dad's hands were shaking. You endangered my daughter's health, her education, over a get-rich-quick scam? And you hid this from me? I didn't know what to do, Victoria whimpered, her usual composure shattered. You're going to leave. Tonight, Dad said firmly, standing up. And we're done here. I want a divorce. After Victoria hurriedly packed some belongings and left, Dad turned to me, his eyes filled with sorrow. Tasha, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. From now on, I'll handle your finances directly. No more middlemen. I managed a small smile. Actually, Dad, I got a scholarship recently. Tuition's covered. His eyes lit up, pride overtaking the anger. That's my girl. Always making me proud. But you deserve a break. How about a vacation? A real one, by the sea. You've earned it. The vacation was like a dream. Blue skies, golden beaches, and the soothing sound of waves. It was a chance to recharge, to put the struggles and pain behind me. I returned with a renewed vigor, ready to tackle my studies with fresh enthusiasm. Now, back at school, I still worked part-time, not out of necessity, but to save up for something special, a gift for Dad, a thank you for everything. Despite the hardships, the challenges, I found myself attending the occasional party with friends, allowing myself to enjoy life, not just endure it. "I see you're going out more," Jenny noted one evening as I dressed up. "Yeah, trying to find a balance. I guess I'm learning it's okay to have a little fun," I replied, adjusting my earrings. "Just don't forget about us when you're famous," she joked, throwing a cushion at me. "I won't. Could never," I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a reflection of someone who'd been through a storm and emerged stronger. I was still careful with money. Some habits are hard to shake, but now it was not out of desperation, but out of a desire to build a future I chose. A future that was finally looking bright. Growing up was tough, with Dad always on my back. Mom passed away when I was little, so it was just the two of us, and Dad took the whole single parenting gig to another level. He had rules for everything. No hanging out with the kids who liked to race cars, no wild hair colors, and studying had to be my top priority. "Jenna, those kids are trouble, you hear me? Stay away from them," Dad would warn me, his voice stern, whenever he saw me chatting with the neighborhood thrill seekers. "But Dad, they're just having fun. We're not kids anymore." I'd shoot back, trying to stand my ground. "It ain't about age, it's about making smart choices. And dyeing your hair like a traffic light ain't smart," he'd say, squinting his eyes as if he could scare the rebellion out of me. I wasn't having any of it. "Maybe I want to stand out," I'd retort, my voice just as firm. Dad wasn't just a stickler at home. He had a reputation around town too, always preaching about responsibility and hard work. He meant well, but to me, it felt suffocating. Every time we clashed, which was often, I'd pack a bag and storm over to Aunt Marie's place. She was Dad's younger sister, lived a few blocks away, and was the exact opposite of him, easygoing and always with a smile. "Aunt Marie, why can't he just chill out? It's like he's stuck in some ancient times," I'd complain as soon as I dropped onto her couch. She'd chuckle, handing me a soda, before sitting down next to me. "Jenna, your dad's just scared. He lost your mom, and he's afraid of losing you too. But he sees the world his way, black and white. But that's just it. I'm not him. I need some color in my life, you know?" I'd say, popping the can open. Marie would nod, her expression softening. "He does go overboard. But he's not wrong about everything. Give it time, you'll see some of his points." That was Aunt Marie, always trying to bridge the gap between Dad and me. But back then, I couldn't see it. All I knew was that I wanted out. So, as soon as high school was over, I grabbed my chance. Thanks to my grades, I landed a scholarship and went off to college, leaving my hometown, and Dad, behind. College was freedom. For the first time, I made my own decisions without anyone looming over me. I dyed my hair purple, stayed out late, and, yes, even got involved with a group that loved street racing. But I kept my head in the books. I wasn't about to waste the scholarship or the opportunities one had fought so hard for. After 4 years of hard work and a fair share of fun, I graduated with a degree in accounting and a job offer from a respected firm in the city. My boss, Mr. Thompson, was a tough guy but fair, much like Dad and his expectations, but without the personal judgment. When I met Mike, it felt like hitting the jackpot. It was at a casual hangout with some friends from work. He was there with a buddy who knew one of my colleagues. Mike had that easy charm, a quick smile, and an infectious laugh that pulled you right in. We got talking, and it turned out we had a ton in common, both mad about classic rock, both foodies, and both into old movies. "Ever seen Casablanca?" he asked, eyes lighting up as he took a sip of his beer. "Are you kidding? Here's looking at you, kid is my go-to toast." I laughed, thrilled to meet someone who shared my quirky interests. We hit it off immediately, and before long, we were inseparable. Dating Mike was a whirlwind of dinner dates, movie nights, and lazy weekends just lounging around. 6 months later, we were married. It felt right, like everything was falling into place. The first year was bliss. We talked about everything, made decisions together, shared our dreams and our bank accounts. I felt like I finally had the partnership I craved, equal, open, just perfect. But then, things started to change. It began subtly. One night, as I was getting ready to meet some friends for drinks after work, Mike frowned. "You're going out again? You know, you've been kinda busy lately," he said, his tone more accusing than curious. "Just catching up with the gang. It's been ages." I replied, trying to keep the mood light. "Yeah, but maybe you should chill on the outings. We could use some us time," he insisted, not really asking but telling. I paused, a bit thrown off. "Sure, we can plan something for the weekend?" It didn't stop there. Mike's suggestions became rules. He started expressing his concerns about the time I spent with my friends and even my workmates. Then came the big ask. One evening, Mike was going through our finances, a spreadsheet open on his laptop, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Babe, I've been thinking," he started, not looking up from the screen. "It would make more sense if I managed our finances. Just hand over your account details." I hesitated, surprised. "What? Why? I've been handling my finances since forever. It's just easier this way. I can keep track of our spending and savings. Plus, it's what a husband does, right?" he said, finally looking up at me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I felt a chill, but nodded, unsure. "Okay, if you think it's best." From then on, Mike took control. He decided where we went, what we did on weekends, and how we spent our money. If I suggested something different, he'd shoot it down. "No, that's not a good idea," he'd dismiss without discussion. As months passed, I found myself fading into the background of my own life. My friends stopped calling so much, knowing I'd likely say no. My world shrank to what Mike approved, and the vibrant, independent woman I once was began to disappear. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. Living near Mike and his parents seemed ideal at first, like having a close-knit family just next door. But reality bit hard and fast. His mom, Nancy, was a sweet talker with a controlling twist, and his dad, Frank, was just as invasive, treating our place like it was his own. One chilly evening, I was just getting home from a long day at work, my mind on the thousand things I still had to do, when Nancy called. Her voice was sugary sweet at first. "Jenna, darling, have you started dinner yet? Mike must be starving after his hard day," she cooed over the phone. "Actually, Nancy, I just walked in. Dinner's gonna be a bit late tonight," I replied, trying not to let my frustration show. Her tone flipped cold as ice. "Well, I hope Mike doesn't have to wait too long. A man needs his dinner on time, you know." It wasn't just the dinner comments. Nancy believed Mike should be pampered because his job was supposedly more demanding, despite us both working full-time. Her idea of fairness was skewed wildly in her son's favor. I was expected to handle everything else, cooking, cleaning, and then some. It didn't stop at our home either. Nancy had me over at their place regularly, pushing a broom or a mop into my hands the moment I stepped through the door. And Frank? He was no better. Weekends were his domain apparently. He'd show up at our house first thing Saturday morning, remote in hand, ready to take over the living room. The TV volume cranked so high it made the windows rattle. He'd settle in like a king. "Jenna, where's the beer? I thought you'd have stocked up for the weekend," Frank would bellow from his makeshift throne. "It's in the fridge, Frank," I'd call out, trying to hide my annoyance. Frank would grumble something under his breath about kids these days as he raided the refrigerator, leaving a trail of crumbs and empty bottles in his wake. Mike never said a word against it, always shrugging off my complaints. It was exhausting. Between my job, keeping our home, and catering to the whims of my in-laws, I was stretched thin. I began to lose pieces of myself, my time, and my sanity to their endless demands. Things at work took a sharp turn when my company decided to absorb a smaller firm. The accounting department there was a mess, a tangled web of inaccuracies and outdated systems. It fell on me to sort it all out, which meant long hours and even more stress. Coming home late became the norm rather than the exception. One particularly grueling evening, I got home to find Mike lounging on the sofa, flipping through channels, the dinner table untouched and empty. "Where's dinner? You know I get hungry after work," he complained without even looking my way. I dropped my bag, my patience worn thin. "Mike, you know what's been going on at work. You were here first, why couldn't you have made something?" He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that filled the room. "Me, cook dinner? That's women's work, Jenna. I'm not about to start playing house husband." I felt a surge of anger. We agreed, before we got married, there'd be no men's or women's jobs. We're supposed to be in this together. I shot back, my voice rising. Mike's face darkened, and he stood up abruptly. "I don't have time for this nonsense," he snapped, grabbing his keys off the counter. "Where are you going?" I demanded, but he was already heading for the door. "Out. Away from this." He threw over his shoulder, and then he was gone. He disappeared for days. No calls, no texts, just silence. I was left alone, wrestling with my escalating workload and the crumbling facade of my marriage. When he finally came back, he acted as if nothing had happened, ignoring the strain and tension between us. Around that time, I received some good news at work. My efforts hadn't gone unnoticed, and I was promoted with a significant salary increase. I was over the moon, until I shared it with Mike. "That's great, babe," he said, a too quick smile flashing across his face. "Guess what? I'll quit in a week. No point in working now that you're making enough for both of us." I stared at him, stunned. "What? Mike, we need to discuss this together?" He shrugged, completely unconcerned. "You're making plenty. I can finally relax a bit." The next day, I went to work early, the weight of my thoughts heavier than ever. I stayed late again, my mind buzzing with figures and files, but also with a growing resolve. When I finally got home, Mike was waiting, his expression sour. "You're late again. Where's dinner?" he started in immediately. I took a deep breath, my decision clear in my mind. "Mike, we need to talk. This isn't working. I can't be the only one trying here." He scoffed, crossing his arms. "So what are you saying? You want a medal for working hard? Come off it, Jenna." "No, I want a partner. Someone who stands with me, not on me," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. Mike looked at me, really looked, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding. But then it was gone, replaced by the stubborn set of his jaw. "If you can't handle this, maybe you shouldn't have taken that promotion," he retorted coldly. Then he grabbed his jacket and slammed the door behind him. 9 months had slipped by, months where I found myself trapped in a life I never envisioned. Mike never went back to work. Instead, he filled his days meeting with friends and often stumbled home late, reeking of booze. Each time I dared to question him, he'd explode in anger, retreating to the sanctity of his parents' home where he was still treated like a child rather than a grown man. "You're being too hard on him, Jenna. You should be supporting your husband, not tearing him down." Nancy, his mother, would screech over the phone whenever he ran off to them. "I'm supporting the whole family, Nancy. What more do you want from me?" I'd shoot back, my patience worn to nothing. It wasn't just supporting Mike, his parents had grown dependent on me too. Small amounts of money were frequently requested, money for groceries, money for bills. It seemed their hands were always outstretched, waiting for me to fill them. Her only response was to hang up, leaving me fuming and helpless. One day, amidst this ongoing storm, I received a call that shattered the uneasy calm. Aunt Marie's voice was soft but strained as she relayed the news of Dad's passing. My world stopped. The last time we spoke, we had argued, silly things, youthful pride clashing with his rigid ways. I never got the chance to make peace. "Can you come with me to the funeral?" I asked Mike, a desperate plea for some semblance of support. He barely glanced up from the TV. "Nah, I can't handle funerals. You go handle it," he muttered, dismissing my need with a wave of his hand. So, I went alone. The funeral was a blur, faces of family and friends I hadn't seen in years, all mourning the man who raised me alone. But it was after, while sitting in Dad's lawyer's office, that reality hit hard. Dad had left me everything, his house and savings, a total of $250,000. Tears streamed down my face as I realized, despite our differences, Dad had been preparing me for a future, perhaps knowing I'd need a way out someday. That night, in the quiet of my childhood home, I thumbed through old photo albums. Pictures of me in rebellious outfits, with bright hair and brighter smiles, all screamed of a girl who dreamed of freedom. I had traded those dreams for security, only to end up more caged than ever. As dawn broke, clarity came with it. It was time for a change, a big one. The money and the house, it wasn't just an inheritance, it was my ticket to a new life, a chance to rediscover the fierce girl who once believed she could conquer the world. I need to do this, not just for me, but for the woman Dad believed I could be, I whispered to myself, a vow in the still morning air. When I walked through the door of what used to be our shared home, the air was thick with expectation. Mike and his parents were already waiting, like vultures perched for the kill. Their eyes lit up with a mix of greed and curiosity as they spotted me. "So, Jenna, how much did old Hal leave you?" Mike asked, his voice dripping with feigned concern. I hesitated, clutching the documents a little tighter. Before I could reply, Mike snatched the papers right from my hands. As he scanned the figures, a triumphant grin spread across his face. $250,000, he exclaimed, turning to his parents, who immediately began to buzz with excitement. His mother, Nancy, clapped her hands together. "Oh, that will cover a lovely vacation for us all. How about Italy? Or maybe a cruise?" Frank was already nodding in agreement. "And we need new furniture. Something nice, something grand," he chimed in. Mike, not to be outdone in the dreaming, banged his fist on the table. "It's settled then. I'm getting a new car. It's about time I rode in style." I stood there, stunned into silence for a moment, as they carried on, planning as if I wasn't even in the room. Gathering my courage, I finally spoke up. "Listen up, all of you. This is my inheritance, not yours. I decide how it's spent, not you," I said, my voice firm, louder than I felt. Mike whirled on me, his face twisted in anger. "You think you're in charge here? Keep talking like that, and I'll divorce you so fast it'll make your head spin." His threat hung in the air, but before I could respond, Nancy grabbed me by the shoulders and shoved me towards the door. "Think about how you're acting, Jenna. You're too arrogant. Maybe a night outside will cool you off," she hissed, her voice venomous. I stumbled out the door, the shock of the physical and emotional assault numbing my senses. For a moment, I stood there, bewildered by the audacity of their entitlement. But then, almost unexpectedly, a laugh bubbled up from within me. It started small, but grew in volume, echoing into the quiet street. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a strange, exhilarating freedom. With nowhere else to go, I drove back to my father's house. The familiar walls welcomed me like an old friend. That night, the reality of my situation began to sink in, and a plan started to form. First thing in the morning, I picked up the phone and dialed my office. "Hey, it's Jenna. I need to ask for a couple of weeks off, personal leave. I've got some things to sort out," I explained when my boss, Mr. Thompson, answered. "Jenna, take all the time you need. I've noticed you've been off your game a bit lately. Whatever it is, sort it out. We'll manage here," Mr. Thompson replied, his voice kind and understanding. "Thanks, Mr. T. I appreciate it more than you know," I said, grateful for his support. Hanging up, I felt the first real peace in a long while. The next steps were clear. I needed to legally separate myself and my finances from Mike and his parasitic hold on my life. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to fight back. I was sipping coffee from Dad's favorite mug, enjoying the quiet of the morning, when my phone began to buzz relentlessly on the kitchen counter. At first, I ignored it, savoring the peace and the slight amusement at the thought that Mike and his parents were probably scheming about my inheritance. But the phone wouldn't stop. It was like it had a life of its own. Finally, I picked up, bracing myself for the onslaught. "What is it, Mike?" I snapped, not in the mood for niceties. "Jenna, you need to give us access to the money. I can't get into the account." His voice was a mix of frustration and panic. I couldn't help but laugh, the sound sharp and clear. "That's because I've restricted access, Mike. You can't use my money anymore," I said, enjoying the moment of revelation. There was a pause, a silence filled with his disbelief. "You can't do that. We're married." "Not for long," I replied curtly and hung up. That should have been the end of it, but of course, it wasn't. That evening, just as I was settling down with a book, I heard the familiar sound of a car pulling up outside. Mike and his parents came storming up to the front door, their faces twisted with anger and desperation. They didn't even wait for me to invite them in. Nancy pushed past the doorway, her voice shrill. "You think you're clever, huh? Cutting us off like that?" Frank followed, his brow furrowed. "You're supposed to share what you have with your family." Mike was the last to enter, his expression one of betrayed fury. "This is about us, Jenna. You're ruining everything." I stood my ground, feeling more secure in my decision than ever. "This is not about us, Mike. This never was. It's always been about what you could get from me." His face contorted with anger. "Well, guess what? We're getting a divorce." That's when I handed him the divorce papers, neatly prepared and waiting for this moment. The surprise on his face was almost comical. "What's this?" "Your freedom," I said dryly. "Sign them and you're free to leave." He scanned the documents quickly, a greedy spark lighting up his eyes as he signed. "Fine. But remember, I get half, 125,000. That'll adjust our plans, but it's something." Nancy muttered under her breath. "Should have been the full 250,000. Getting a piece of wool from a black sheep, aren't we?" I couldn't hold back a laugh. "Actually, you're getting nothing. Inheritance isn't divided in a divorce here. Not a cent of that money is yours." The color drained from their faces. Mike's hands shook as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. "But we've already spent anticipating that money. We went on vacation, bought things on credit." His voice faded as the reality of their financial blunder hit him. Nancy's eyes were wide with fear, and Frank looked like he was about to collapse. "This isn't my problem. You made your choices," I said, my voice cold but steady. "Now, if you don't leave, I'll call the police." The threat was enough. They stumbled out, a mix of shock and anger marking their defeat. As the door closed behind them, a profound sense of relief washed over me. They were out of my life, finally and completely. Selling Dad's house was tough, like closing the final chapter of my old life. I felt every pang of regret as I handed over the keys, but I knew it was the right move. With that money, I bought a new place right next to my work, a cozy little house that was all mine, no strings attached. At work, things were looking up too. Mr. Thompson had been watching my progress closely, and one afternoon, he called me into his office. The sun streamed through the blinds, casting lines across his face as he looked up from his papers. "Jenna, you've been pulling in some impressive numbers, and your leadership hasn't gone unnoticed," he started, his tone serious but warm. I stood there, hands clasped in front of me, waiting. "I want to offer you the position of deputy director. You've earned it," he said, his eyes steady on mine. "Thank you, Mr. T. I won't let you down," I replied, a mix of pride and excitement swelling in my chest. It felt good, really good, to be recognized for my hard work and not just seen as a bank account or a maid. Meanwhile, Mike and his parents' situation had taken a nosedive. They were buried in debt after their reckless spending spree, hiding from creditors who weren't too pleased about unpaid bills. They had to sell their house, but even that wasn't enough to cover their debts. Last I heard, they were cramped in a small rented apartment, all of them working odd jobs, just to make ends meet. One evening, my phone rang, and Mike's name flashed on the screen. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. "Jenna, listen, I've been thinking a lot," he started, his voice shaky. "I made a mistake. A big one. I want to make things right. Maybe start over?" I couldn't help but laugh, not a joyful laugh, but one tinged with disbelief. "Start over? Mike, do you even hear yourself?" I know it sounds crazy, but I've changed, Jenna," he insisted, desperation clear in his voice. "Changed? Mike, you only call when you're out of money or options. You don't need a restart. You need a reality check," I shot back, my patience thin. And with that, I hung up. I realized then that I was truly free, not just from Mike, but from the hold his family had on me, from the life I was forced into. Now, I really understand what Dad tried to teach me all those years. He knew the value of standing on your own, of making tough decisions for the sake of your future. I only wish I could tell him he was right, share a moment of reconciliation.